we just have one, yay. Third hour. I'm going to use this to take attendance because I didn't really write down as you guys were coming in. That should work. Classwork. Muscles of the leg, third hour is the one we're doing right now. We're going to learn our last 9 muscles today. Going to have an easy afternoon while I'm checking in on our progress. A reminder, we had reviews due today for chapter 6. That'll give me time to look them over before Wednesday. You have a review. And then Thursday, we have our test. On my side of things, I see 7 people are done. If you are already turned in, if you're one of the 8 already turned in, maybe open up the student version of today's lecture. Again, the first part, the note-taking part, that's up to you if you want to use that. Come back to it later or ignore it. But the last 3 slides are our activity slides. So we've been putting activity slides at the end for checking for understandings. So you'll be coming back to that, so you could go ahead and open it now. Nobody said they were having trouble logging in, so I'm assuming you didn't need a new code. That's good. Gonna minimize that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started with the lecture. You guys have the student version open. This first portion, you know, note-taking, that's up to you. At the end, we have these 3 slides. These are going to be our activity slides, okay? So we'll get started on this lecture. Okay, so pretty cool, muscles of the face, many layers, very different than the muscles of our limbs, because a lot of the muscles aren't attached to bones, but they're attached to skin and other connective tissues. So like every other, like every other PowerPoint we've done with the muscles, our goals are to name origin and insertion and to identify action. So if we can name the origin and insertion, and we know that the insertion moves toward the origin, the action is pretty easy to reason out. So looking at these muscles, if I know that this is the origin and this is the insertion, if I pull the insertion toward the origin, what do you think is going to happen? Can anybody shout out what happens? Do you think you're going to pucker your lips? Are you going to raise your corners of your mouth? Are you going to suck your cheeks in? We're going to raise the corners of our mouth. Maybe I need to pull my chat box up. So first I want to review LADSNOR. Most of us are getting the concept of LADSNOR. A few of us are still struggling. So LADSNOR is a mnemonic that you can use that tells you how muscles are named. The reason why that is useful to you is because you could see the name of a muscle that you've never been introduced to, and you would be able to know something about the muscle, okay? Like if you saw flexor digitorum, you would not need to know anything about that muscle in advance. Knowing that we name things according to locations and according to actions, I would be able to say this is going to flex the digits, which are your fingers, right? So L, location. This lecture has a lot of location muscles. The frontalis covers the frontal bone. The temporalis covers the temporal. The zygomaticus is on the zygomatic, okay? So lots of these are named according to where they're found. So we use those regional terms. Action, we already mentioned the digitorum. You also have the extensors, the adductors, the abductors. So they all tell you what the muscle does. Direction of fiber is probably the one that we struggle with the most. So this is telling us which direction the muscle fiber is running, which is important when you're trying to figure out what its action is, right? So rectus means they're running straight up and down. Transverse, these muscle fibers are horizontal. You have the internal obliques running diagonally. You have the external obliques running diagonally. So oblique means diagonal. Today we're going to talk about orbicularis, which means they're going in a circle. They're orbiting, right? So the stomach is a good area to look at for direction of fibers. On the test Thursday, I will ask you to tell me what each letter stands for in LADSNOR, and then identify a muscle that's named according to that, okay? So you have 3 days to plan your answer. So example, you're just gonna say L equals location, example, temporalis, something like that, okay? So I don't need a lot of information. We have a lot of noise outside today. So LADS is for shape, not size. Common mistake is to say size. We talked about the deltoid, triangular shaped, trapezius, trapezoid, plat, flat, latissimus, broad. Number of origins. So this is a good example here. You can see the separate heads of the bicep muscle. So this is number of origins, which remember origin is on the immovable bone. Insertion is where the movement happens. So 2 points of origin. Triceps would have 3, a quadricep would have 4. LADSN. O is for origin and insertion, not just origin. Common mistake is to say origin. So a good example is the sternocleidomastoid, which starts on the sternum, the clavicle, that's the cleido part, and it runs up to the, you can see mine right there, that runs up to the mastoid process. So sternocleidomastoid tells you where it begins and where it ends. Another example is our brachioradialis. So it starts on the brachii and it goes to the radius. R is for relative size. So this is only used when you have a group of muscles. So this is comparing the muscles so they're relative to each other. So the longest in the group is the longest, the shortest is the brevis, the largest is the maximus, the smallest is the minimus, and you have a medius in between, okay? So these are common words that you would use for relative size. Also major and minor, pectoralis major, pectoralis minor. LADSNOR, what questions do you have? Okay, so now we're going to go through and name 9 muscles. So naming muscles of the face, facial muscles either are they're in one of 2 categories. They're either in the facial muscles of expression, tells you something about how a person's feeling, or they're part of chewing. So like the buccinator and the masseter are major chewing muscles. So that's what our muscles are going to do. Frontalis, named according to location. Common mistake on the test is the frontal bone originates, the frontalis muscle originates on the frontal bone. It does not. Okay, it originates on the aponeurosis, which is this flat connective tissue covering your skull. We mentioned aponeuroses last week with like latissimus dorsi, trapezius. So those are flat sheets of muscles. This is the cranial aponeurosis because it's covering the cranium, or you might see it called the epicranial aponeurosis because it's above the cranium. So it is originating here, it's inserting here on the skin of the eyebrows and the root of the nose. So remember, we always want to pull the insertions towards the origin. So what happens when you pull the insertion towards the origin? The eyebrows raise, the forehead wrinkles, okay? So this is where knowing the direction of the fiber is helpful in identifying the functions. So pull the insertion toward the origin and it will raise the eyebrows. Frontalis muscle, any questions? Orbicularis is orbiting the eye or orbiting the mouth, another orbicularis. So this is a sphincter muscle. Sphincter muscles, they are circular muscles that regulate openings. So in this case, we can see the muscle is encircling the eye and the eyelid, right? So when this muscle tightens, it closes the eye. So it originates above and below. It originates on the frontal bone and on the maxilla bone. It's inserting on eyelid tissue, the tissue of the eyelid. So it's not inserting on a bone at all, which is unique to the facial muscles. So when you close it, you can see when she tightens this muscle, it'll cause a closing of the eye. Orbicularis, going in an orbit like the Earth around the sun. Oculi, because this is your ocular area, right? Regional terms. Any questions on orbicularis oculi? Also orbiting the oral region where we have oral language, all that relates to the mouth, right? So this is encircling the mouth. Again, originates above and below, so the mandible and the maxilla. And again, it's inserting on tissue, the skin and the muscle surrounding the mouth. So when this muscle tightens, right, it's going to close the opening, so it causes a puckering of the mouth or of the lips. So this is your kissing muscle. Orbicularis oris. Any questions? Temporalis covers the temporal bone. I want you to put your fingers over your temple, what you think of as your temple. And then I want you to clench your jaw. You should be able to feel this muscle move when you clench it, when you tighten it, when you close your jaw, when you're chewing. You can feel it right here. Okay, so this is originating on the temporal bone, and it's going to run down to the mandible. And then when you pull on your insertion, the mandible moves up toward the temporal bone, which causes a closing of the jaw. So this is one of our jaws or muscles of chewing and mastication. Sometimes when you clench your jaw out, you get those headaches, right? So that's because of that overexertion of the muscle of the temporalis. Temporalis, any questions? Zygomaticus. So zygomatic bone, remember, is your cheekbone, right? Cheekbone, right here, zygomatic. So this muscle extends from the zygomatic bone. This is the origin, so the immovable part. It inserts on skin and muscle at the corners of the lips. We can see that here underneath the skin. When you draw this muscle from the insertion toward the origin, we can physically do that and see what happens, right? We can see that the corners of our mouth raise. So this is your smiling muscle. Okay. There, it's frontalis and zygomaticus. Zygomaticus, any questions? Named according to location. The masseter, so mastication is chewing. Okay, so this is your chewing muscle. This is your major chewing muscle. It's a very powerful muscle. Put your hands at the back of your mandible over the bulky part here towards the joint. And again, do that clenching of the jaw. You can see my hand move when I clench my jaw. Right? So that is the muscle that is causing that to happen. So you can feel that when you're chewing. So it's running from, again, the zygomatic, but this time rather than going to the corner of the mouth, it's going to the base of the jaw. So it's pulling from below all the way up. Masseter for mastication. Any questions? So the buccinator or buccinator, depending on who you're talking to, is referring to the buccal cavity. Remember that's your cheeks. The area between the cheeks is the buccal cavity. The cheek is the buccal or the buccal. So this muscle you see underneath the masseter, okay? It runs horizontally. It originates near the molars, the back teeth of the maxilla and mandible, runs forward to the corner of the mouth, so the orbicularis oris muscle. And then when it pulls, it flattens the cheeks. So compresses the cheeks like when you're sucking on a lollipop, or when you're trying to whistle, or probably if you play a wind instrument and they don't want you blowing your cheeks out, right? Like that, they want you to hold them in. So this compresses food and keeps it in the buccal cavity. So this actually aids in the whole eating process because it keeps food in the area where it has to be mechanically broken down. Okay, so horizontally, and it's deep to the masseter. That's the buccinator. Any questions on that one? So just like the other muscles, it's best to internalize it by like naming it on yourself or naming it for a friend. Examine it, pull on your insertions, move them towards the origin, see what happens. The platysma plat is flat. So this is a big sheet of muscle in the front of your neck and chest. It runs from your chest, that's its origin. It inserts on your lower lip. So the action happens at the lower lip, you pull it down. So connective tissue of the upper portion of your chest, inserting on the tissue around your mouth, and it causes you to pull your lips down. An exaggerated frown, a lizard face, whatever. Frog? Maybe it's a frog face. I don't know. So that's the platysma, big flat muscle. Underneath the platysma, any questions on that one? Underneath the platysma, you have your sternocleidomastoid. You can see it as a band in your neck when you turn your head one way or the other. We already mentioned that this is named according to origin and insertion. So you have 2 points of origin, so technically a bicep. You got one on the sternum and one on the clavicle. You can see that here, one on the sternum, one on the clavicle. They run up and anchor behind your ear. Remember the mastoid process. So when I pull these anchors towards their origin, it causes me to lower my head. So bending the head down. Or if I only pull one at a time, it causes me to rotate my head and look to one side or the other. Okay, that is the sternocleidomastoid, perhaps the most difficult one, but chop it apart into its syllables, and I think you'll find it easier to say. Any questions on that one? Okay, so our follow-up activity, we're going to take 5 minutes here if we need that long. This is my typical face quiz, and because we've run short on quizzing time, we're going to do it in class. There's just 8 muscles to label. If you could take time, there's 9 muscles total. I don't have the platysma in this picture. So take a minute and fill this out. This will be our last in-Zoom activity. Does anybody need more time on this? I'm going to be calling on people, so let me know if you're going to need more time. Livia, could you give me number 1?
Frontalis.
Perfect. And so quick. How about Kirsten Corser? Can you give me number 2?
Is it the orbiculus oculi?
It is, yes. Number 3, Max William.
I said the zygomaticus.
You are correct. How about Josh, number 4? Similar to number 2, just a different second word.
The orbicularis oris.
Yes, correct. Okay, let's give a tricky one to Bally. What is that number? 5.
Sternocleidomastoid.
Very good, yes. Sophie, can you give me number 6?
Is that the temporalis?
It is. And number 7, how about Salamar? Yes. And number 8, how about Zach?
Wait, number 8, is that the master?
No, masseter goes up and down. So number 7 is masseter.
Oh.
Number 8, you wear around your jeans maybe to hold your pants up.
Oh, is it the buccinator?
Yeah, good, perfect. Good. Okay, anybody need any of those repeated? So a little bit of practice of that. Okay, so then, if anybody's chatting, I don't see you right now. what I want you to do, so I found this graphic yesterday and I was so excited because I was thinking, I love when I get to see you guys in your projects. So like when you do videos and you put yourself in your projects. So this guy, he was showing a whole bunch of different muscles by making the expression that that muscle would create. So I want you to make one of these, but just with the 9 muscles that we did today. So you don't have to do all of these muscles. And to clarify, I don't want you to go and find pictures of other people and put them in there, because what's going to be fun for me is seeing you do it. And again, you going through the action is part of that learning process, part of you internalizing information. So you're going to make a picture, and if you could exaggerate these, you know, like I can really tell your eyebrows are raising, and then you can label that with like the frontalis muscle, because that's which muscle would do it. So the next slide, I created just a blank table for you, so you can make your faces in any order you want or show your actions, and then label it with the muscle that's producing the action that you're showing me, okay? And that is the only thing I have for you to do today. So I'm sure you'll be able to get that done before the Zoom is over, and then just have a little extra time for studying for Thursday's test, okay? What questions do you have? What can I clarify?